In 1878, Renoir encountered another turning point in his career, when his work attracted the eye of a society patron who would help promote Renoir and commission many of his works.
And then we see the breakthrough. He comes to the attention of one of the most powerful women in Paris, Madame Charpentier, who is the wife of one of the most distinguished and most successful publishers of the time, published all the new books by Zola and Flaubert and Huysmans and the Goncourt brothers. She had a salon where these writers and the most important politicians of the day would gather, and painters.
The Charpentiers' influence and support of Renoir, together with the Salon's acceptance of this painting, launched Renoir instantly into high society. It wasn't long before he was receiving commissions from a number of wealthy patrons. And so, the humble Renoir, the son of a tailor, became a part of this elite world. Despite his newfound acceptance as a society painter, Renoir continued to pursue his own vision and development as an artist, bending the Impressionist aesthetic to suit his own goals. And during this period, Renoir excelled at the Impressionists' happy task of portraying scenes of contemporary life. The famous Luncheon of the Boating Party, completed in 1881, is Renoir's attempt to realize the Impressionist vision on a grand classical scale. It is not a portrait per se, but a collection of personal images that together reveal Renoir's vision of life and leisure. A close look at this painting also reveals where Renoir will be heading next.
Luncheon of the Boating Party is the sort of centerpiece of the exhibition. It is also the centerpiece of his life. It's the end of a long exploration of themes of modern life that he had begun in the 1870s. And it culminates in this 1882 multifigural painting, which includes portraits of all his friends and his future wife, and so it's a documentary. But what's important about it is it shows Renoir moving away from the technique that's known as Impressionism. The figures are no longer dissolved into a landscape. There's a real contour and a real definition to them, and this is the solidity that you find later on in his works, in his late style. It's happening now.
The Luncheon of the Boating Party was one of Renoir's most ambitious works, requiring a huge investment of time and presenting major challenges of perspective and scale. His achievement was well worth the effort, for Luncheon of the Boating Party was widely believed to represent the pinnacle of Renoir's Impressionist achievement. Another of his best works of this period is Two Sisters, also known as On the Terrace. It's interesting to note that the girls were not actually sisters, but models. The older of the two was reported to be an actress from Barzentone, who sat for this portrait in exchange for food. In this painting, we see Renoir taking yet another step toward a new style, as his brushwork is not consistently broken or flickering in the Impressionist manner. At the same time, his colors are growing brighter and more solid. This experimental approach was a big hit with the leading Impressionist dealer, Paul Durand-Ruel, as well as with the critics, one of whom called it one of the capital works in his career. Over the next few years, Renoir traveled and explored new methods. It was in these travels that he found new inspiration.
He travels to Algeria and he travels to Italy, and it's there in his dialogue with all master painting that he comes up with a new vision of where he wants to lead his art. And basically what he wants to do, he wants to retain the luminosity that is characteristic of his Impressionist paintings, but he wants to invest his paintings with a more monumental feel.
Renoir was not alone in this crisis. Monet, Pissarro, and Degas were having their own doubts about a movement that was indeed limited to the lighter moments of life. Even the optimistic Renoir was burned out.
Renoir was also becoming discouraged with the direction of his art. He was starting to feel that Impressionism, the limitations of modern life subjects and the limitations of a technique that basically tried to more and more dissolve figures into a landscape was leading towards a dead end. He was becoming more and more interested in old master painting, and his trips to Italy in 1881, 1882 solidified his thinking about art.
The trip to Italy had helped Renoir to move forward by looking back. There, in the churches and museums of Venice and Florence, Renoir found new inspiration in the works of the masters. Now he was ready to begin using the art of the past in his works of the present.
And you'll see how this soft style starts hardening up, that his paint strokes become smaller, that the forms become more porcelain-like. Faces are no longer dappled in sunlight, but they're becoming very solid and stand out against the background.
From this point forward, his figures became more clearly delineated, defined by more distinct boundaries and harsher lines. We see this transition taking place before our eyes in paintings such as Dance at Bougival. Painted when he was 42 years old, Dance at Bougival represents the culmination of Renoir's Impressionist years, while at the same time marking a turning point in his approach to painting.
The Dance at Bougival was painted in 1883. It's the midpoint of his career, and it is this kind of painting that we associate with Renoir's optimistic viewpoint of life. It's people out of doors having a good time. There's romance in the air. There's flirtatiousness in the background. The background is sort of blurred. It's as if we're seeing it through this blue haze. But the foreground is a couple very much in love, even though they're really two unrelated models. They're not a couple. They're actually a friend and a painter, a future painter named Suzanne Valadon. But they're swirling in our space, and so we become part of that pleasurable afternoon at this dance hall in Paris. And it's that sort of bringing us into the scene of making us aware of the joy and gaiety of life, and editing out anything that doesn't really fit the picture that he wanted us to see, which is that life is good, we're always young, and summer goes on forever.
By the end of his life, Renoir had left Impressionism far behind, opting instead for a style of his own invention, although a style influenced significantly by the old masters.
In his last years, Renoir continued to paint, even though he faced great pain from rheumatoid arthritis, which made it very difficult to hold his brushes. But Renoir was undeterred. As he told a young painter shortly before his death, one does not paint with one's hands, but with the heart.
Renoir painted up until the day of his death, December 3rd, 1919. Although by this time he was considered a master, he still thought of himself as a student.
As he said after finishing his last painting, "I think I'm gradually beginning to understand something about it."
It's impossible to sum up the whole of Renoir's work in a single statement. Clearly, Renoir brought to us a beautiful vision of life in his time, a vision of life as he chose to see it. But more than that, Renoir showed us the ability of a human being to transcend the stark reality of his own life so that we might see the beauty of his interior vision. This exhibit provides us with only a glimpse of his genius, a genius which brought us these treasures of the world. I'm Bill Kurtis. Thanks for watching.